Let's open up the Black Series Archive 6-inch figure of Clone Commander Cody.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. I'm working my way through opening up all of my Black Series Archive 6-inch figures, and today I have Clone Commander Cody. Now I know this figure came out a few years ago, and of course Hasbro has just released a new and improved version as part of the 20th anniversary line for Revenge of the Sith this year. So of course I am very keen to get my hands on that new one, but of course just because I have a newer figure doesn't mean that I no longer love and cherish my older figures. Having spent decades collecting the Star Wars 3.75-inch line of figures, I really do love seeing the evolution of Star Wars figures over time. So of course, while I want that new one, I still really love this older one as well. So I'm so excited to open it up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at Cody out of the packaging and check out the articulation and accessories. But first, let's take a quick look at the packaging. While the Black Series 6-inch line uses predominantly boxes for their packaging, the Archive subline uses a backing card and a bubble style instead. We have a rectangular backing card here with a cutout for the top hanger and an angular cutout here on the side, which is echoed with this cut-off corner from the front bubble as well. Keeping with the Black Series theme, of course, we have a black backdrop across the top and down the side. We have the Star Wars Black Series logo here at the top. And because this is part of the 50th Lucasfilm collection, we also have the 50th Lucasfilm emblem here up at the top, which uses a gold color, and that gold color is also used for the nameplate for this figure, Clone Commander Cody. I really like the large rectangular bubbles for these backing cards. We can see the figure packaged nicely in there with two accessories. Behind the figure, we have a light gray panel, which really helps those accessories stand out, and that gray panel extends to the right-hand side, where we see the subline title Archive printed here. Inside that front bubble, we have a small insert card with some really nice monochrome art there of Clone Commander Cody there in the front. Moving on to the back of the backing card, we've got that same artwork from that front bubble insert here on the back, much larger, which is really nice. We also have the title again in that gold color, Clone Commander Cody, and we have a short blurb about the character. A natural and practical leader in the clone army, Cody was a good fit for General Kenobi, to whom he was particularly loyal. And that blurb is repeated in a few different languages. Now, of course, because this particular figure is part of the 50 Lucasfilm collection, we have a fun graphic showing the timeline of Lucasfilm over 50 years, also in that gold tone color, and again another short blurb. Commemorate the first 50 years of Lucasfilm with figures inspired by the Star Wars animated series. So as you can see, it says animated series, so I guess they are inferring that this one is not from episode 3 because the film or series or source is not actually mentioned on the packaging for this particular figure. The rest of the box is just very small actually. We've got the copyright barcode stuff on the underside, which is nice. I like the fact that so much of the back is actually interesting. But of course, I did buy this to open. It does look pretty cool, but I really want to see him on display. So let's open him up. So now I have Clone Commander Cody out of the packaging, as well as his two blaster accessories. So let's get stuck in and check out the details. So of course, on the backing card, it references that this is from an animated series. But of course, I think most of us think of Clone Commander Cody with his iconic appearance in Revenge of the Sith. And that's certainly what I think of when I'm looking at this figure. He has the Phase 2 Clone Trooper helmet, quite unique, with this orange detailing, lots of fun details. So as usual, I'm going to start off with the paint and sculpting, then we'll check out articulation and accessories. And of course, we're going to have to start off with this unique helmet. It looks so cool. So I believe most of the helmet is sculpted in white. Then we've got his visor section in a separate sculpting piece in that orange plastic, and then we've got a few little details connected here, the little antennas. Looks like this little bit here is actually sculpted in part of the helmet. That's quite a small attachment point. That's going to be one of those ones that you're going to be very careful about knocking off. In fact, he does have quite a few little sort of pointy parts. He's going to be one of those ones that's a little bit fragile, even though he kind of looks sturdy for the most of the body. He's got all these very fine pointed details around his helmet. I'm really liking the detail and especially the painting here. So he's got really fine details. We've got the black sort of visor there. We've got white painting across the orange sort of a visor sort of guard here. Really fine detail there in the front. We've got the grill with grey and black. We've got these little details down around the chin, grey, orange, two-tone for sort of the, you always refer to them as sort of mic tips in reference to the original sort of detail component from the original trilogy Stormtrooper helmets. Those are black and grey. We've got the blue tube stripes on the cheeks. We've got the grey stripes across the top. Pretty straight with the sculpting line, maybe just a little bit misaligned on this particular grey stripe. We'll just get a little bit more white on this one than we do on that side, but pretty straight. We can see that continuing on in the back. We've got a black painting detail here, and of course we've got these little silver kind of antenna bits. This one's even got a tiny little gold tip there at the top, which is really nice. Some really fine details. So of course the orange section doesn't move up, it would hit this, of course, so it's not going to be one of those ones like sort of like the viewfinder up and down. My one came with this little antenna just a little bit curved, not so much that I need to treat it with hot water to correct its position. This one is nice and straight, and thankfully the main one here on his left shoulder is nice and straight. I'm always very, very wary of them. There is a tiny bit of flex to it, but not so much that I think you could potentially snap that. So I am going to be very careful of that one, but his helmet looks great. So of course, this particular version does not have a head sculpt underneath. It is not a removable helmet. The new one on the episode 3 anniversary card does have a Temuera Morrison clone trooper likeness, a sculpted head underneath a removable helmet. So that's going to be very different. Depends on whether you like the removable helmet. Sometimes they are slightly softer to fit over the heads, and sometimes the scale is a little bit different to fit over heads. So perhaps you're not as a fan of that and you like the ones that are just solid sculpted. This one might be more interesting to you, but let's move on. We've got the sculpted undersuit showing at the black exposed sections. Clone troopers wear sort of a striped or ribbed undersuit. It's black, so it is a little bit hard to show the detail on camera. It always just kind of looks just solid black, but we do have that sort of ribbed undersuit showing here at the neckline. It's a little bit softer around the exposed details because this is generally where the articulation cuts in, and we don't get a lot of sort of raised detail where things need to move. It's going to be fairly smooth. So looking through underneath these shoulder armor pieces here, it does look quite smooth in terms of the sculpting, not quite the same sort of detail that we get there at the neck, but that's okay. The shoulder pieces, they look like they are cast in an orange plastic and attached on the top. That doesn't look like they sort of float. Some pieces are kind of more connected at the top, like with a little plastic strap. These ones feel like they are connected to the arms, but of course they're quite large. So we'll really have to see how the design of these clone troopers are going to limit or move when we start getting into poses and articulation. Moving on to the chest, we've got some really nice printed details here. So of course he's got his distinctive orange print here down the front that looks nice and lined up as a straight line. We've got these sections here, and we've kind of got sort of built-in weathering. This isn't scratched, this is how it appears. It's printed to look like it's seen some battle, and we've got some cast in sort of deep sort of scratch lines there in the armor, which is really quite nice. And we've got a nice little rank badge here. Blue, sort of yellow, blue, and a darker sort of grey section on that silver plate. I have to say, I am quite particular about little details like this, like the rank badge, and that is really nice. Those little squares are lined up with the sculpting there. That's really nice to see. It always bothers me when it just sort of looks misaligned, you know, sort of offset a little bit, but that's really nice and straight. And I don't really see silver sort of spilling out over beyond the edges of that as well. That's really nice. And of course, we've got the two little black sort of lines over here. I think that's lined up. It's a little bit hard to tell. I think one of those might be just a little bit offset. Just trying to look at that one. I think one of those lines is just maybe a little bit offset from those sculpted sort of recessed lines there, but that's okay. On the back, we have this kind of section here. It kind of looks like a jetpack. Kind of reminds me of the shape of Sabine's jetpack in the animated series Rebels. It's mostly white. We don't have a lot of detail, but we've got some painted components, gray, and this kind of dark bronze color here in the back. We've got the thermal detonator, of course, going all the way back to stormtroopers here in the original trilogy. We've got white, gray, yellow, and orange, so a lot of painted details there. Moving on to the front, of course, we've got that same sort of coppery color, bronze color here on the armband. We've got another little greebly sort of section here, the sort of white section. It's a little bit curved on mine. He's been in his package for a while, so again, that might straighten out with time. So of course this is an older figure. We've got the 2-pin articulation, which while we're talking about sort of paintwork and sculpting, it cuts in just a little bit, you know, it just kind of stands out because of course the pins not really painted, so they do stand out. We've got a white pin here, which is kind of blending in with the bicep, but then it's cutting into the black undersuit and that gray paint stripe, and it's just becoming really obvious. Here again, cutting through gray, white, and black, but the pin itself is white. We have that same kind of deal over here. On this side, it just feels very obvious. It's really showing up in those black sections there of the undersuit, and it's just being a bit noticeable. Thankfully, Hasbro has moved away from using this 2-pin, especially on the arms. They kind of phased that one out. Took them a little bit longer to phase out the leg ones. But on this particular Clone Trooper build, it doesn't actually detract, not as much as those arm ones, because here on the legs, those pins go almost perfectly through the white armor sections. They don't overlap onto the black undersuit like we do get at the elbows there. So that doesn't really mess up the sculpting. And it is the same on the inside of the leg there as well, just a little bit on the top of that sort of calf armor there, completely in the confines of the thigh armor, which is nice. You can see it on that leg there as well, and there. So using white pins for the legs doesn't mess up the sculpting, which is nice. Jumping back up here to the ab plate, we've got a gray ab plate, a little bit plain here in the back because of course it's tucked in very small, but we've got some nice recessed details here on the ab plate, kind of matching up with this sort of Y-shape paintwork here, which is really nice. We've got the big bulky Clone Trooper belt, gray on this side with some orange pouches painted on this side. Sometimes when we get to the lighter color paints, it takes a little bit of work to really cover over paint sort of plastic colors underneath. These orange ones look quite nice, and then of course in the back we've got that sort of bronze color there again. Lots of interesting bronze touches on Cody's outfit here, and also on this side here as well. So we've got just a little bit of painting here on the codpiece armor section with some sculpted lines there. We've actually got a little bit more of sort of the lines for the undersuit here on the sort of top of the leg section, which is nice to see. I do want to sort of believe that this is an undersuit on this figure. Now we don't have quite as much painting or weathering here on the lower legs. The right leg is just plain white armor. We do have an orange knee plate and white striping on the back of that sort of knee plate strap there. No painting there on the boots. Now on the left leg, we do have one painted stripe with a little bit of sort of faux weathering there. You can sort of see the scratches that are part of the painted design there on the inner thigh. And again, the same orange knee plate, which is painted. You can see we've got a little bit of black kind of leaking through the orange paint where it hasn't quite completely covered it, but this is a high range of motion area. I get the feeling if it was thick paint, this is going to be where we're sort of going to have issues, because thick paint is going to really interfere with the sort of movement. It's going to get scratched a little bit. So not too surprising there in the back. A little bit better on this side. You can really start to see it there, but it's on the back of the figure. And again, no paint there on the boots. Overall, I really like the sculpting. Taking a look at the hands just very quickly. Again, this looks like these are black pieces with paint applied to the back hand plate here. And on this side, we do have two different hands. His left hand is more of a classic grip. I'm hoping we'll kind of get a two-handed blaster rifle pose. And his right hand has a very extended separate trigger finger, which is quite nice. I'm really hoping that it's going to hook into the trigger guards of his has included blaster rifle accessories there. That looks really nice. Again, quite good paintwork here. And of course, we do have orange components and painted orange components, where these parts look like they are made out of orange plastic. Then we've got painted components, and this orange paint is over a dark color. Like here, it is painted over black, and here we've got digital printing over a white plastic. So that's really interesting. Overall, pretty cohesive with the orange colors. When you look at them under strong lighting, you can see, yes, there is some variation. Here it looks a little bit more lighter. This is a little bit more of a darker orange, because of course there's just a little bit of that kind of, it's not really a translucency, but you can kind of get a little bit of sort of depth in plastic to the way just sort of light hits it, as opposed to paint. So there's just a tiny bit of variation there, but overall I think he looks pretty cool. Of course, an older sculpt, we can see what Hasbro can do with their modern sculpting and especially the digital printing, but overall it's mainly just the old pin articulation style that's really sort of jumping out to me, like this is an older figure, because we really do see the step up in paint technology with the face printing. You don't really see a huge difference with regards to the painting work on helmets. Of course, there is a little bit of an improvement over time, but you do really see the big jump in sort of the generations of sort of human face characters especially. So apart from the articulation in the elbows and knees, I don't think he's showing his age too badly, to be honest. Of course, this is an archive figure, which in itself is a reissue of a much older figure released in those sort of striped black box eras, not even the black and red box. He goes way back. So he's quite an old figure because he's such a popular character. Of course, he's going to appear in the Black Series line a few times, and he's just looking really cool. I love all the variety of little details and the good paintwork. Oh, the other section I forgot to mention, this is the grey striping down his arms. Again, like the orange paintwork on his front, it kind of has that faux weathering where it looks like it's scratched through, but that's just how it is printed. I really like that. Kind of ties in with the grey of the abdomen, and we've got a little bit here on this side, but of course it's cut off because we've got a bit of a sculpted sort of compad sort of here, which doesn't have any additional paintwork. It's just sort of a raised sculpted detail there against the white of the sort of forearm armor there. So perhaps it could have maybe some tiny dots of detail paintwork on that, like the rank badge, but it looks okay. It's not really grabbing my attention in a negative way, so I don't mind it there. And I can really see that sort of the vertical lines of that striped undersuit here at the top of the thighs, which is really nice. Not as visible on this shoulder section, but of course, if we're going to be posing with blaster rifles, we're going to be moving these shoulders a lot, and if that's sort of ridged, it's going to really start to sort of grind against other plastic components. So I think he looks really cool. I'm really happy with the paintwork. There is maybe, one or two little spots. I've got like a funny little blue spot tucked away here under the arm. That's a minor flaw, possibly, a tiny flick when they were really working on this rank badge here. But as soon as I put a blaster rifle in his hand, that's going to completely disappear. So that's fine. I'm usually focused on things like the face. This helmet looks great. Tiny sort of prominent details like the rank badge and just the overall printing. I don't have major smudges. I guess that's one of the useful things when it comes to kind of weathered characters. If you have kind of scratches or paint flaws, it can kind of just sort of melt away into the overall battle-worn nature. Now, of course, if this one had more weathering, I'd have a little bit more to talk about, because often I notice Hasbro does a lot in the chest, kind of fades out towards the bottom of the legs, and then it generally just kind of disappears completely on the back of the figure. So he does have some kind of deep sort of scratches on the chest, but we don't see those sort of actual sort of carved in, sculpted sort of scratches on the rest of the figure. I don't see any of that in the lower legs or on the forearms, though to be honest, I'll probably have to go back and sort of watch episode 3 and perhaps even the Clone Wars cartoons to see if he does actually have sort of a battle damage like this on the rest of the figure. I think some fans prefer to sort of have, you know, a little bit more sort of weathering to kind of add to those sculpted lines. Some people don't like the clone troopers looking so white and clean, but I honestly don't mind. Sometimes when Hasbro attempts to do mass production line weathering, it comes across a little bit grubby or a little bit heavy-handed in parts. And to be honest, if you really enjoy your weathering, you've probably gotten quite good with applying it yourself. So I don't mind the slightly cleaner look, so it makes it easier for me to handle them. Sometimes I feel like when there's sort of weathering all over it, I'm worried about potentially scratching it off and then leaving clean sections, as it were, but that's just me. Okay, let's work on the articulation. So I'm a little bit nervous about these shoulder pieces. I think that's going to restrict just how high up we can get these arms, but first let's jump into the neck. So this one's not really sort of the modern ball joint as we sort of know it now. You can kind of see, hopefully it's dark, the articulation style. It's kind of more sort of centered towards up and down, and we do have quite a range here. It can kind of click all the way up and go all the way down. That's actually quite deep for a helmeted character. It does look a little bit odd there in the back, of course. And let's just test out. Oh, I can get him to that side. Oh yeah, there's a little bit of a click, a little bit of a step, but I can turn him to the side. That's actually pretty reasonable movement there. He holds those positions well. You know, if he's looking up, you know, ordering 66 on Obi-Wan, or perhaps looking down at the dropped lightsaber. Of course, he does do a lot of sort of different head poses. That's quite fun. I'm worried about these shoulders. Okay, let's give it a go. Let's go for the left one, the tricky one. Okay, yeah. Where I'm already hitting this sort of antenna on the cheek section of his helmet. I can kind of adjust that a little bit, but that is completely hitting. And to be honest, I'm not sure how much I'm actually going to be able to get that up anyway, just because of how close that is all fitting there. So you can kind of see just how much, like, it's not dead straight, not too bad. We might go a little bit higher on his right side. I'm being very careful because I get the feeling that these might kind of not stretch, but just kind of, I don't know, misshapen a little bit as I'm kind of forcing them over. Okay, so that one kind of stops here. I really see they're kind of flexing and kind of changing shape a little bit. I really don't want to kind of bend them permanently. You can kind of see I'm getting a little bit of a bend there with that one up, but I can get to about there before I'm really hitting the limit. So I'm just going to sort of pull that in there because I don't want to misshapen that. Let's see. Okay, so rotating is perfectly fine. That completely moves out of the way. It just kind of just scoops in here with the bottom underneath the clone trooper armor. I forgot to show that you don't really see the bodysuit through the sort of the seam between the front and the back of sort of the chest plate here. Clone troopers have kind of a seam, and not very different to sort of stormtrooper armor. And the way that the arm articulates in here, we don't really see the sort of the black undersuit here. If I'm looking up really, really close, it is just white all the way in there. It isn't like we sort of painted in there to sort of give the illusion of the undersuit completely under there. The black arm is just for the sort of the movement here. It's not painted black in there, but it's tucked in there so much I can't see it. Let's move up. That's very easy. It does look a little bit odd with this antenna in his underarm there, but he does actually raise his arms up pretty well. So there is an option there. Okay, important for blaster rifles is the elbows. So these ones can be a little bit tight, and I generally find one of them wants to move more than the other. Now this one is moving fine. This one is tight on my figure. Let's test out the other side, because I find I just always a little bit careful with figures when they're stiff because I don't want to stress. Yeah. The armor, I thought maybe it was the pegs, but what I think is happening is they're just completely hitting the inner edges of the white armor pieces are hitting the inner sort of elbow strap of the elbow armor piece. So that is just kind of hitting on this section here. I thought because we have two pins that we'd get the arms all the way up, sort of, you know, touching up here. That's just not going to happen. I'm really hitting considering the articulation style, that is really a shame. We're not really utilizing much of that articulation there at all, but you can kind of see we can get the hands here, we can pull them in. So if he was going to be wielding a lightsaber, we could probably get those arms in, but we're not going to get them as tight to the body as some human characters can, because we're just getting the upper body hitting in with the bicep armor right here. So I can't get those elbows closer into the body because of those sort of sculpted sections there. So he can still get his hands reasonably close together if we were going to put a lightsaber in his hand. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but pretty close. Now that I've got them together, you can kind of see just a tiny bit of a shade of difference in the orange. I feel like this hand plate just is a little bit better at covering the black than this one. Just there's a really subtle difference, mostly around the sort of the edges there, but I'm probably going to sort of have the hands a little bit more like this to grip a two-handed blaster pose. So that looks like we've got pretty good maneuverability for that particular pose. Let's test out the midsection. That's quite a click. It's a little bit clicky. I can rotate him. And he's kind of got stopping points. Some figures, they really feel smooth. I can spin them around. He's got very specific sort of steps where he clicks into place. But I can move him about as much as I would want to, side to side. But as you can see, that armor is pretty much touching these large boxes on the Clone Trooper belt. So we're not really going to get a little bit of a wiggle back. Not really much forward. They are just completely hitting there in the front, and side to side is almost non-existent. If you get that wiggle, it's not really going to be anything noticeable. You can kind of see it as I go rocking backwards and forwards, but side to side, but it's not really going to look anything different when I put them on display. You can see the gap there in the back. I can kind of rock them back, but we're just kind of really hitting on the top of the boxes there. So not really too much, but side to side is generally most of what I use that particular mid-torso articulation. And of course it works really well for Clone Trooper armor. It's a little bit sort of restricted by the fact that the Clone Trooper armor design just has that chest plate coming down so close to the belt. Stormtrooper armor tends to sort of sit up just a little bit higher, but the articulation's kind of hidden under here, which is nice. I always like it when Hasbro has a costume design element that they can utilize to hide that articulation. It's always a little bit of a shame when we have just like a plain shirt and they just have to cut all the way through. It's really nice when articulation is hidden. Bit of a shame for those pegs, but nice work here. So the Clone Trooper armor has these really high points that often just kind of hit very quickly into the sort of inner sort of section here of the codpiece. So you can see this one is a little bit stiff going up the front. Might try this one. It's just going to hit very quickly. You can see that. If I'm going to rotate it out, looking in the back, yeah, so we've got a sort of a swivel, which is completely hidden under this armor piece, which is really nice. So we've got this section connecting into the hip, and then we've got a swivel hidden under the armor. I love it when they're able to do that. And if we move that point a little bit more to the side, we should be able to get the leg going all the way up, which is better. So you kind of have to sort of realign things to kind of make it look a little bit more straight. But if you need to do a kick, we do it that way instead. And again, on the other side, we swivel that so we can go up and kind of bypass that point past the hip going towards the back, and then you can go quite high. Now I got this one a little bit more freed up. You can really see just how high he can kick if he needs to. Maybe he's jumping from an explosion or something. Okay, so now we've got the 2-pin knees. I gotta say, when I was getting this one out of the package, this one feels stiff. This one feels like it's just got a little bit of a wiggle to it. So I'm gonna go with this one first. I feel like sometimes you just gotta go with the ones that don't feel like they're gonna fight you. So I'm getting that same restriction, even though we've got the 2-peg articulation, which means characters can often get their heel all the way up to the back of their thigh. We've just got that strap from the separate knee plate that is hitting and causing a restriction here. Normally this would be sort of a sculpted undersuit and we wouldn't have an armor component creating that limit there. So we're not getting the full range of motion, which makes him such a great contender for an updated sculpt where we don't have to have these pegs cutting into the sculpting. Again on the same side, same exact kind of range of motion there. So you can get him into a kneeling pose, but he's not going to be getting all the way up like you can with the other ones with this 2-pin that don't have that sort of armor sculpting. I really like the sculpting here with the armor. Clone Troopers are just so interesting, but they just cover up so much of the sort of the human body underneath. I had a feeling because of course when Clone Troopers are introduced in Attack of the Clones, they were almost entirely computer generated. They weren't really designing it with the sort of, end goal of having people wearing the suits. Of course, when Star Wars fans and costumers started recreating the costumes themselves, they quickly discovered that it wasn't really designed to be walked around in as a real life suit. Everything's just so tight and covering up the undersuit far more than the original trilogy Stormtroopers do. So when they created suits of armor to wear in the live action Disney Plus series, like we see in some of the flashbacks from Order 66, they kind of had to tweak the armor a little bit. So there are some differences between sort of the Disney Plus era depictions of a live action Clone Trooper armor and as we see it digitally rendered on a screen in the prequel films. And of course the animated series don't have to worry about human actors either. So yeah, we've got those restrictions from the original Lucasfilm design, which are going to be copied over here in the action figure form as well. Just a quick little look at the ankles here. The back plate from the calf armor comes completely down and is going to restrict us. I can't move that back. That is completely locked up, but I can move it a fair bit forward. So we've got flexibility there. And of course, we do have a little bit of sculpting there at the ankle. I forgot to mention earlier, it's kind of got like that little strap going across the ankle, a little bit of sculpting detail here, but they honestly look very plain because they're not really designed to be sort of standout pieces. They kind of blend into the bottom of the armor, like they just look really good. Cool. He stands up pretty well. Do need to tweak him a little bit. This one's just got like a little bit of a wiggle to it on that leg. Some figures I find they just get a little bit loose over time. His other leg is very straight, but he does stand up well. I don't have balance issues with him, even though he does have a little bit of sort of a bulk here on the back. That's not really affecting him. So he looks cool. I love the colors and he can pose about as well as I was expecting. So let's get him kitted up with some blaster pistol accessories. So now we have to get Clone Commander Cody all kitted out with a cool blaster rifle, and of course he comes with two. We have the DC-15 blaster carbine and the DC-15 long blaster rifle. Kind of confusing, they're both basically called the same thing. I'll call this one the blaster or blaster carbine and this one I'll call the blaster rifle. So of course this one is kind of like the predecessor to the Stormtrooper E11. It's kind of got that same similar shape, kind of a two-handed shorter rifle compared to the long one here. It looks pretty well made. I've got to say it's actually got some really nice kind of sharp feeling details to it. It feels like it's cast with some nice fine detail. It doesn't feel rubbery. It actually feels quite sort of solid, but there is just a little bit of flex to it. So it's not going to be one of those ones that kind of snaps with brittle sort of plastic in there. And we've got a very slender enclosed trigger guard. So it looks like a flat black. I believe it's cast in this plastic rather than being painted. It just doesn't have quite that sort of finish that feels like a gloss that you get with paint sometimes. So you don't have to be worried about sort of scratching the surface of your accessories, getting them into your action figure hands, which is kind of important to me. Let's take a quick look at the longer one. Again, this looks like it's made out of the same plastic, a bit of sort of almost like a matte finish with some nice details there. Less kind of pointy details than on the shorter one there, but nice nonetheless. We've got a rectangular shaped trigger guard there, which is quite nice. And let's just have a look. A little bit of flex, but it doesn't feel rubbery, which is always a concern with these really long ones. We don't want them to look bent out of shape or sort of droopy. This one looks like that is pretty sort of straight, which is good because sometimes with the two-handed poses, you don't want them to kind of curve trying to get them into their hands. So that's really important. So let's go with the shorter one, the blaster carbine. I really hope that his trigger finger is going to look really cool in this. Of course, he's wearing black gloves, which means his hands kind of disappear against the black of the accessory, but I think he's going to look pretty cool. So his hands, oh, his hands actually have got quite a good swivel. Okay, so there we go. Went straight in, nice and easy, got a good grip. It's black on black, a little bit hard to show. I completely forgot to show the articulation on his hands earlier. Of course, he can swivel there. Now this hand has, I believe it's a side-to-side rocker. It's a little bit hard to spot because it's black. I can kind of see it here. He's got a side-to-side rocker. Yep, there we've got a little bit because we've got armor plates in the way, but that is a side-to-side one, and he looks really cool. Of course, it's a little bit long to be sort of posing with sort of a blaster pistol style pose, so let's move the other hand into position. This one, of course, is also going to rotate, and this one has a front and back rocker. You can just kind of see it there in the palm of his hand. That one's going to move in this direction, while as his hand over here holding the blaster rifle can move in this position here. So I'm going to quickly see, because I feel like it's got a little bit of a tight grip between his fingers and thumb. Sometimes you kind of got to pull either the finger or the sort of the thumb open a little bit. I'm hoping I'll just be able to kind of wrestle this into place. Let's see, can I get him? Oh, yep, pressing down into his hand. We can get that into a two-handed pose. Of course, I always work on sort of tweaking these later, but that's not bad for doing that pretty quickly. It's always kind of fun when you get your figures straight out of the packaging. You kind of want to get them sort of kitted out and posed. So you can see I've got just a little bit of a curve there, but I'll work on kind of getting that position better. Just a quick note, I obviously just got this into position very quickly, but I'm just noticing that his thumb, because it's quite rigid, it's kind of pressing into the side of the blaster and kind of wanting to sort of put a slight bend in it. So it's going to take a little bit of adjustment because I really don't want to risk slowly bending this accessory over time. So that's just something to be aware of. And of course, when he's pointing it straight, his finger hooks into that trigger guard very nicely. When I'm kind of rotating it towards his body to match up with his left hand, I'm rotating it away from his finger, so it's no longer hooked in. Again, this is my very quick first attempt at a pose. I'll probably tweak his wrist a little bit to get that better, and I'll put up some pictures of some better poses because I think this looks really cool. But of course, this may not be how I decide to pose my particular Cody figure, because he comes with a second blaster rifle. So of course we have the long blaster rifle with this particular figure. The new episode 3 anniversary carded figure, as well as having the head sculpt underneath the helmet, comes with the shorter blaster carbine and not this accessory. It comes with a small hologram of Emperor Palpatine issuing Order 66, which, considering that's the anniversary figure for episode 3, I think that that's perfect. But of course, if you are a fan of the long Clone Trooper blaster rifle, you'll probably be just a little bit sad that the new figure doesn't come with this one as well. So perhaps if you end up getting both, like I hopefully will be getting in the future, you might decide to pose this figure with this particular rifle and pose the newer one with either the carbine or the hologram, because I think that hologram looks pretty cool. So of course we've got that rectangular trigger guard for this one. This feels like it's made out of the same plastic as this one, which is really nice. It feels like it's going to hold its shape. Hopefully that'll be good for poses. So if I kind of hook it kind of a little bit with the sort of the end right up against his bicep there, I can get his finger into that trigger guard really well. So if you want to sort of do some interesting sort of one-handed poses and things like that, it fits in there really nicely. He can, let's test out his balance, because I feel like he can pose with that if he wants to be looking cool. He's a little bit unsteady just in this quick position, but there we go. He can stand posed with this in his hand. But of course, it's going to probably look a little bit more correct if we do this in a two-handed grip, where I'm just going to flick that kind of end out over the top of his forearm armor there, and I'm just going to see if I can get his thumb, because it's a bit rigid, gripping over this section. So I'm kind of rotating it around again, so the finger is no longer lined up with the trigger guard. Again, I will practice this, kind of work on the poses, kind of make him look like he's kind of aiming it rather than just kind of standing here showing it off. But oh no, he's going to be a little bit wobbly just because of that slightly loose leg, but just a little bit of a quick tweak and he looks pretty cool. Not my best work, it is a little bit of an awkward pose, but just wanted to kind of just make sure that yes, he can get both hands onto it, because there is, you know, a reasonable little lip there for him to hold on to it. Could also try kind of getting it around this section here as well, but just going to have to take a little bit of time to open up that hand and really get him into position. But he looks really cool, and just sort of like a really fun way to kind of start sort of celebrating the 20 years since episode 3 was released all the way back in 2005. I can't believe we're coming up on 20 years already. He's just a little bit off a balance just with that big blaster rifle in his hands. So of course, if we've got Cody, we need Master Obi-Wan, and I was so excited that I was finally able to kind of get these two on display. I've had this one open for a while. I think he's really cool. Of course, he is also an older archive figure. He has that 2-peg articulation in his knees, but he has the more modern style in the elbows, where he doesn't have the pegs there, which I think is really nice. So just as a quick aside, of course, one accessory that I thought would be fun to come with Cody would be Obi-Wan's lightsaber, because of course it comes with this figure. And in the Black Series line, rather than having it sort of all fully sculpted like many of the 3.75-inch figures, for the Black Series line you simply remove the clear blade and then you are left with the small lightsaber hilt accessory. So for one last little pose, I know this isn't an accessory that this particular figure comes with, but I thought it might be fun just to see what it looks like if we slot this one into his hand. So on this hand, I'm kind of have to grip it a little bit round the sort of the emitter box sort of section here, the sort of panel there, a little bit closer to the bottom, because this is a little bit thinner up to the top, so he can hold it. If he was like giving it to Obi-Wan, I really want a Black Series scale Varykino for Obi-Wan to sit on to really start creating the scenes. I would love to see more Star Wars beasts in the Black Series 6-inch line. That would be fun. But nevertheless, I can get Cody to hold the lightsaber if you want to kind of recreate some of that there as well. Of course, Obi-Wan no longer has his lightsaber, but perhaps you want to do some cool toy photography. That would be kind of fun. And yeah, he can hold it, so that's fun. I just wanted to kind of test that out. So this has been a lot of fun. I know he's an older figure. I've had him tucked away for quite a while, but I thought with the anniversary, and of course I know I kind of held on for a little too long because we've got the new one coming out, but you know, I love seeing the generations of figures, and just because there is a newer one with some slightly different details doesn't mean that I no longer love the toys that I've already owned for quite some time. I collect to collect. I love seeing how Star Wars toys have evolved over the decades, and it always takes me back to the day I got them and sort of added them to my collection. So full of fun. You know, Star Wars is a joy in this house, and every time we are able to add a piece of Star Wars merchandise to our collection, that is a happy moment. And so for us, we don't like to get rid of our Star Wars toys. They are part of our journey. So he is cool. He's got his quirks. The articulation, I've never been the biggest fan of it. I like the modern ones, but I'm just very nostalgic about episode 3. And I love the fact that, of course, Hasbro has the archive line, reissuing those older Black Series figures that were starting to get very hard to find on the secondary market, and release them for modern sort of collectors jumping into the Black Series line that doesn't have to sort of track down those harder to find and pricier figures. So I love the archive line. Both of these were added to my collection via the archive line, so that's just fantastic. I hope it's something that Hasbro continues on year after year, because, you know, iconic characters like these, I think everyone deserves to have in their Black Series collection. I think they look great. This has been a lot of fun. I think he looks cool. I'm going to work on poses because I'm not sure which blaster rifle I want him to hold for my permanent display, but There we go. Clone Commander Cody in the Black Series Archive line. I think he looks great. Love the color scheme, the detail. He's really cool. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series 6-inch figure and had a lot of fun checking out the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I've also opened up the Archive Episode 3 Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.